I think jiu-jitsu's the perfect thing for everybody, and there's a spot for everybody, so it's just finding what about jiu-jitsu that individual or that child likes and showing that part of jiu-jitsu to them.
Yeah, and Muay Thai it's all about the core. If you don't have a core, you're fucked. Excuse the language, but yeah.
My name is Allison Tremblay. I'm 27 years old and I am a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Okay, line up. Okay, warming up. Facing in, side to side.
From the time I ever played sports, I always played at a very high competitive level. My dad has always owned a jiu-jitsu club, but it was neat. He never forced me into it, never pushed me towards it. So it was always something that I did like in the off season when I was playing junior AA hockey and regional level soccer. So I did it kind of as a pastime while I was focusing on those sports. And I played both until I was 16. And then my parents were kind of like, we're sick of paying for both hockey and soccer. You need to make a choice. You need to choose one sport. So I chose hockey, and I played that up until I graduated from high school. I had a couple opportunities at that time to go play in the States on a scholarship, but I decided to go to Carleton. I stopped playing hockey. I didn't really have a sport to play, and my dad was just kind of like, hey, come try jiu-jitsu, let's take it to that next level. When I was 18, I did my first tournament, that sparked the excitement and the passion for the sport. Was after that first tournament, I was hooked.
What I want is when you turn, okay, go ahead. I want Mike to lift his hips so that everything connects.
So my brother is a black belt as well, and so is my father. So we train together all the time. Like I grew up training with my brother. I grew up with my dad as my coach through my every year that I've trained. It's great. It's really a neat experience that I don't really know how to describe. It's something to be able to have people that you trust 100% in your corner all the time. It's definitely frustrating at times too, because you have like sibling rivalries, you have father-daughter like fights and spats, but it's at the end of the day, it's really cool to have your dad and your brother supporting you in a really big part of your life, which is awesome.
It's really a contest of hips. So if I can get my hips below yours first, I win on that battle. You don't want to take this path. It's tempting, it's shorter, but you're gonna lose because you're moving forward while they're moving down. And if I shoot in on someone and they get their hips below mine, it's gonna be very hard for me to take them down.
My parents were always, you can do any sport you wanna do. You don't even have to do a sport. You can do anything you want, but you have to try to do it at the highest level possible. So for me, it was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and it was athletics. So when I compete and whether I do really well or not as great as we had hoped, like as a team, you have your coach who's supposed to give you feedback and he's supposed to say, this is what you did really well, this is what you did not do well at all, this is what you need to work on. But there's also that side that, as a daughter, you want your dad to always be proud of you. He always is proud of me, but just in that moment, there's times when he's talking to me as a coach and I have to remember that.
I would say the hardest thing is balancing my roles. One thing I always joke around with Allison is we're friends. And I like that. But on the other hand, that is a relationship I'm willing to sacrifice, only because I have a more important role and I'm their father. And they're gonna have lots of friends in their life, but I'm gonna be their only dad, so that's the role I can't sacrifice. But as a coach, there's gonna be times when I'm disappointed and there's gonna be times when I'm proud of them. So when I'm talking to them, they really gotta make sure they know, You know, now it's your dad talking, now it's your friend talking, now it's your coach talking.
Okay, escape. Ready?
We kind of are in a good rhythm now, but it was definitely hard in the beginning to make that separation a lot of times. Even like on tournament days and stuff, you know, I get very like stressed and very not necessarily in the best of moods. But I think what makes us such a good team is that we have that honesty and that trust in each other no matter what.
So my name is Roshan Musa. I'm a Sudanese Canadian. I work for the federal government and I train in Jiu Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and Muay Thai. So I grew up mostly in West Africa, Côte d'Ivoire, a little bit in Ghana. I played soccer and basketball growing up, pretty much since I was 7 or 8 years old. There was a sort of a compound where we grew up, and there used to be karate classes in the park, and I had wanted to join, and my dad said, no, that's not something girls do, so it was one of the things I just put to the side. Played basketball in undergrad. I went to the States to do my BA, and then we immigrated here in 98, and then when I moved to Canada, was just going to a regular gym, and I was walking home from the gym one day and I saw some guy putting up a poster, and I just kind of peeked, and it said Muay Thai kickboxing, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And so I called and I went in 2 days later, and that was kind of the start of it. I was bored with the regular gym, sort of the weights and the treadmill and that sort of thing. And I think a part of me had always been interested in the martial arts. I have 2 brothers, and we grew up sort of recreating kung fu movies around the house, so there might have been some sort of latent like sentiment there. And I thought, why not something new? So I went. I was the only person in the class for the first 3 days. It was still a pretty small school at the time. Loved it, like fell in love with it right away. At that point, wasn't sure that I was gonna compete. It was just something new and super fun. And a few months later, I threw BJJ into the mix as well. Heard about a women's fight card in Toronto. Sort of interested in maybe taking that next step. I think just having always competed in sports, it just seemed natural. That sort of started that process of being interested in wanting to fight. Unfortunately, that fight card fell through, and it was about another 6-7 months, very frustrating, of trying to find competition opportunities in Muay Thai. And so eventually I just switched over and started competing in Jiu Jitsu. Did that for a few years, took some time away, came back. By then the Muay Thai scene had evolved a bit more, and so then started competing in Muay Thai as well.
Good job, guys. Beautiful work.
Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome.
For training.
Submission Scalina, so let's go.
My dad has been running a martial arts club for 20 years, but so the current one we're training at now, Alpha MMA, it's been open for just over 10, and it's great. It's in a small town. We have like 11,000 people in our community, and it's so much different than any other martial arts club. You know, you come to clubs here in Ottawa or clubs in Toronto. There's a large group of 18 to 25-year-old guys who are in like the prime of their physical life and are trained really hard. And our club is not like that at all. We have, I think, probably 70% women, 30% men, which is always just like inverse to every other club that I've ever been to. Like a lot of our club members, the adults anyway, are between 30 and up to 60 years old. Because we live in a small town, you know, when you're 18, you move, you go away to school, and then you come back when you want to raise a kid. So we don't have a lot of those like young guys, but we have a really great system in terms of of like rolling and training to get better versus rolling and training to beat your partner. And I think that that's allowed us to have so much success.
So when you're doing exercises or practice, whether it's in jiu-jitsu or it's at school, the big secret is don't look at ways to cut it short, look at ways to make it longer. So if you want to get better at cartwheels, instead of doing 3 and then running the last 10 feet, try and figure a way where you can get 5 in.
We have a really great kids program, and that I get to be a part of, that I get to teach as well. That is just, it just is so great. And I think when you have a club that is your family and is your part of your community and part of who you identify with, when you go to like Abu Dhabi and you go to these big tournaments, you're fighting for them and you're fighting for the people that you train with every day versus fighting for yourself or fighting for whatever, which is, to me, is what makes it a lot more special too.
But today I'm cheating a bit, so I bought a lot of pre-prepped salads. But then I'm gonna throw in some of my own greens and edamame and stuff, and then I'm cooking up salmon and tuna for the protein part. Also, I can't eat very much before training. I need a pretty much empty stomach, otherwise it's not gonna go very well. And then I find that once training is done, it's just too late to eat, and I can't sleep if I don't have an empty stomach. So pretty much anytime before 3 p.m. I gotta get any kind of food I'm gonna eat that day into my system, and then that's pretty much it for me. I was diagnosed with PTSD and double depression in early 2017. I had just come out of what was probably the worst depressive episode I'd had in my life, and it was a very scary experience. And it was one of those where you realize, oh, I can't do this on my own anymore. And so in the treatment and recovery since then, you sort of start to look back and start to be able to put the pieces together. So as we have talked, there has been a significant amount of childhood trauma up into early adulthood as well. And one of the things when I started training Muay Thai and Jiu Jitsu, just martial arts in general, it gave me this sense of ownership, of control of my life, something that in retrospect I never quite felt like I had. It was always sort of like your destiny is in someone else's hands, and so you end up making decisions just to avoid that, as opposed to the decisions that you actually want to make about your own life. Since I started training, it's always been the one thing that has been a constant in my life, and every time that I've had to step away, it's the first thing I come back to, whether it's been because of injury or family issues or even the mental illness. Every time you come back to it and you start training again, and you get to decide this outcome for yourself, and you take that power and then you start applying it in the other parts of your life. So now I've been in recovery now for about 1.5 years. I've never felt this solid before. I can honestly say that being able to train, and it doesn't always work out how you want it to. You don't often get to train as much as you want, or I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. So I had a really bad depressive episode in the week leading up to that Sunday. And this one was bad in the sense also that it just came out of nowhere. Like for the last 5-6 months, I'd gotten really good at sort of sensing them coming on, being able to mitigate. And I usually do try to be more creative with meal prep because I do enjoy cooking. But it's just one of those things where it was either just shut down completely or find a way to continue to live through. Like during the worst of it, I really felt like I was living in the in-between. So you'd have these really bad episodes for a significant chunk of time, and then you'd come out of them for about a week or so, and then you'd slip back into one, and it was like trying to cram all the life that was possible in those in-between periods. So I still food prepped, but it was a very, very minimalist approach to what I would normally do. And then that way, it's a way of saying to myself, yeah, it's it sucks right now, but you can do this. And I think that's important for people to realize, is that just because someone is acting like they're, 100% doesn't necessarily mean they are. And for people who are struggling with recovery, it takes a while. Like I was not expecting to have the kind of episode that I had, and it really messed with my head. One of the things actually that helped pull me out of it, one of my coaches, checked in and was like, because we have essentially a standing training session on Saturday mornings, and so he checked in. He's like, "Hey, am I going to see you this morning?" And I didn't even wait for the doubt to creep in. I just said yes. And then of course I questioned it, and I was like, I should have not, and I'm like really feeling up to it. And it was like, no, you make that decision to continue living, essentially. I figured, I'll go to the training session, and if it's not a great one, at least it's something that I accomplished, and so that helped.
This is the loop that you do when you go back to the club?
Yeah, like I run out here and then I run to like Coleman and then I go down the Trans-Canada Trail.
And that's like 8K?
It's 7.5, like where I stop.
I think I'm the only athlete who competes at my level that has a job. I wake up at 5:30 every morning. I go to CrossFit. That's what I use for like my strength and conditioning. I come home, I eat breakfast, and I go to work for 8 hours a day. I come back from work, I do like 40 minutes of cardio, and then I'm doing my training. There's also a lot now, especially now because Worlds is coming up. Like I'm 5 weeks out from the World Championships, so it's a little bit more regimented. My diet's a little bit more restricted as well, which always puts me in a great mood. You get in that new habit and that new routine, and it's very regimented. And for me, structure works really well. So if I need somebody to kind of lay out that plan for me and say, okay, you're going to wake up at this time, you're going to do this, you're going to eat this, then you're going to go, and I need that structure laid out. It's just like staying healthy and keeping my body like in check and fueling my body with the right foods and making sure that, also like a positive mindset. I'm a very big believer of like, the mindset is way more important than the physical stuff. It sounds silly, but like I've had a couple people who've not doubted that I would ever win Worlds, but just kind of have made jokes and not taken it as seriously as I take it. And for me, like I can't have that in my life, or I can't have that, especially coming into a World Championship. So it's also really important. There's days where I don't want to go for that run. I don't want to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, but having people around me who kind of kick me out of bed at 5:30 when that alarm goes off is great. And it's, to me, that is way more important than what I'm doing physically, is making sure that I'm in the right headspace all the time, which is exhausting, but it's good for sure.
Hey, time!
I think like with any female sport, the cute girls get a little bit more attention than the not pretty girls, which is, you see it in MMA, you see it in the UFC, right? But like, again, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because if you have that gold medal around your neck, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And I think that is just really important to remember. And, you see favoritism with everything. But again, I think it happens in anything. I think it happens in work. I think it happens in, relationships with people. But with jiu-jitsu, you have this ability, regardless of anything, if you just have to put the work in and you just have to try as hard as you can, and the results or whatever you want to get out of it will come. And I think that's just really cool.
slowly coming down. It's a bit of an emotional roller coaster. Is like months of emotion just kind of flooding over. It wasn't the fight I wanted to fight, but I just have to focus on the wins. Yeah, appreciating that I even get to do this, right? This was a pretty big goal, and the fact that I made it, that in and of itself is a massive, massive victory. So just got to focus on that. I think I'd visualized a different achievement. I think a little more validation, I guess, for all the hard work. I couldn't fight my fight. I wasn't loose enough. I couldn't. There's a lot that I wanted to do that I couldn't do, and for me that's disappointing. But part of this whole journey has been about accepting imperfectness, I guess, and being a little bit less critical and more forgiving of myself. So I didn't have the fight I wanted to have, but that's how this game works. It doesn't always go in your favor. Your game plan doesn't always come to fruition, but you learn from it. And so that's what I'm going to do. Getting into the ring, there were a lot of times during this training camp I didn't think that was going to happen. It seemed like there were so many. Every time I thought I turned a corner, something else would happen to kind of interrupt training camp. So even just reaching this point, I'm happy with it. So, yeah. At one point I thought, actually more than one point I thought, maybe this is stupid. Maybe I'm chasing the wrong goal. Maybe this isn't supposed to be my journey, and this is the universe trying to tell me that, But just this need to do it was always stronger than that voice, and I'm kind of grateful that it was, because even in there, getting your face smashed and your legs kicked, there was just this determination to not quit. I don't know, it was weird. It was, I was very conscious of this isn't what I wanted to do in this fight while I was not doing it. And yet I was determined. I thought, okay, this next exchange, I'll find my footing, this next one. And I just chased her for 3 rounds and I never found my footing. But I didn't want to stop chasing her. And I think that means I'm on the right path. And this is my journey.